Okay, Rabotai, today I wanted to introduce to you the Sefer of Rabbi Shelomo AbenDanan, the Mechaber Sefer Asher li Shelomo and Bakesh Shelomo. Rabbi Shelomo AbenDanan lived between the years 1848 and 1929 as the AbenDanan of the city of Fez. Just a little bit of historical background on Rabbi Shelomo AbenDanan. He came from a lineage of great Rabbanim, starting from Rav Saadia Dinan from the year 1496 already. That's where this Rav Saadia Dinan was. We'll call it the patriarch of the family. And there was Rabbanim one generation after the next. They were great Rabbanim, Dayanim. His father was Rabbi Moshe AbenDanan, and his uncle was the famous Rabbi Yitzchak AbenDanan, the author of the Sefer LeYitzchak Reach, which one day we might discuss also. Now, Rabbi Shelomo AbenDanan, already from a young age, it seems to be that there was letters that he was writing. They were writing to him, even in Inyanim of Kabbalah. He had one of the great Rabbanim of his time was Rabbi Avner Yisrael HaTzarfati. That was also a great lineage. The Tzarfatis were direct descendants of Rabbeinu Tam. If you look at the Art Scroll early Achronim biography, it talks about the Tzarfati family from Fez moved sometime around the 1400 area before. I don't exactly know when, and they moved from France to Fez, and that was the Tzarfati family that were Rabbanim throughout the generations. And this Rav Avner Yisrael Tzarfati, nicknamed Ish Tzarfati, Aleph Yud Shin, was born in 1827 and was niftar in 1884. And he was a big figure and served as a great model for the Shlomo AbenDanan. Already, you see a letter that he's writing to. They're writing to Rabbi Avner Yisrael Tzarfati on all types of Inyani Kabbalah as well. Now, what happened was like this. So this Rav Avner Yisrael HaTzarfati was his main Rav, and after getting married, he got married to his to somebody from his family, actually the daughter of Rabbi Shaul AbenDanan. He was on the Beddin of Fez for a while, until when the French took over in 1918, they made an official Beddin and an official rule that that they're going to start paying the Dayanim, and there's going to be an official tribunal system. And that was in the capital of Rabat. Rabbi Raphael and Kawa was there at the time. He asked that Rabbi Shelomo AbenDanan join him, because Rabbi Shelomo AbenDanan was known as the Gadol of Morocco, together with Rabbi Raphael and Kawa. And Rabbi Shelomo AbenDanan acceded to his request. He moved to Rabat, and they served in an equal capacity. Just before we get to the actual content of some of the interesting details in Beddin that he gave over to us, Rabbi Didia Monsonego, who was later to be the chief rabbi of Morocco, writes in his Sefer Pe'at Yam Erech Tfilah Yud that he remembers watching the way that Rabbi Shelomo AbenDanan would pray, and he would just watch him, that he wouldn't move at all in his tefillah. He wouldn't be, as we call it nowadays, a shuckler. Like that. No, he was still, and he was like nidmeke amud barzel. He looked like an iron pole that just didn't move. So he was he had a particular ofenat tefillah. He wrote piyutim as well, but that's not what I want to focus. I want to focus on book review, which is a little more about his works, which is Bakesh Shlomo and Asher li Shlomo. Asher li Shlomo was newly printed in a phenomenal print, a beautiful, beautiful print. It was printed by somebody called Rabbi Yaakov Torjaman, who lives in Israel, in the year Tavshin Ayin Tet, which is 3 years ago. It was reprinted. Beautiful, and not even the whole Sefer is printed. And he has a beautiful Hagdama, which I'm getting a lot of information that I'm sharing with you today. I'm gaining it. So so what happened was in 1919, Rabbi Shelomo AbenDanan, a year after he was in the city of Rabat, one of the Zechadash, yes, one of the places in the Beddin of Fez vacated, in his hometown in the city of Fez vacated, and basically they stopped. They stopped. I think it was Rabbi Vidal Tzarfati that was niftar. They stopped functioning the Beddin because there was nobody. They were missing a dayan and they didn't know who to appoint. So at that time, Rabbi Shlomo AbenDanan had a dream that he was having wings. So he was afraid that he was going to die that year. So he was very perturbed. He asked Rabbi Rafael Ankawa what to do. Rabbi Rafael Ankawa told him, it's not saying that you're going to Haz v'Shalom die. It's saying that you should go back to your city of Fez, and they need you there. And indeed, that's what he did. And he became the Av Bedin of that city of Fez. And they appointed Rabbi Aaron Bodbol as the third Dayan. Rabbi Aaron Bodbol was my grandmother's uncle. And I'm actually working on the writings of that particular Bedin of Rabbi Shlomo AbenDanan, Rav Matatias Sirero, and Rabbi Aaron Bodbol. And it should be coming out, hopefully, sometime in the near future. Near future by book writing is years. So let's see when that happens. So this Rabbi Shlomo AbenDanan was sat on the Beddin in Fez, and so a lot of the psakim that we have are things that happened in the city of Fez. But first, let me discuss with you certain klalim, certain traditions in how they were posek in Morocco. And this is very important because the Hachamim of Morocco throughout the generations gave a very, very particular and I would call it founded approach to halacha, which is very important to apply nowadays if you know the rules. For example, there are many times in the Shulchan Aruch where it's written, Stam veyesh. Another Shulchan Aruch writes a halacha, then he writes veyesh omrim, and some say. So the halacha is by Stam veyesh, Rabbi Rashti Stam veyesh, halacha kestam. The halacha is like Stam. Now what happens if the Rama says, I agree with the yesh omrim? Now, we're not saying that the Shulchan Aruch disagrees with that because the Shulchan Aruch brought it as a yesh omrim. So here, do we also follow like the yesh omrim, or do we follow, maybe over here we would have to follow like the yesh omrim? Because the Shulchan Aruch, it's written stam v'yesh. Usually you go like the first opinion, the stam. But here, the Rama agrees to the yesh omrim. So Rabbi David Sabah, who was one of the Rabbanim of his generation, the Shoshanim le David, in Likutei Dinim, Choshen Mishpat, Daf Kuf Chav Zayin, says that when he was in Rabat, so Rabbi Shlomo AbenDanan was living there. So he says he asked this question to Rabbi Shlomo AbenDanan, and Shlomo AbenDanan says he asked this question to his Rav, Rabbi Avner Yisrael Tzarfati, and he answered that we do not go, when we say Stam V'yesh, it means we absolutely and categorically follow the Stam, and even against the Rama that said like Yesh Omrim. And that happens many, many times where you have to know how to apply this halacha. And that was one example. There was many other klalim that Rabbi Shlomo AbenDanan gave over. I spoke on Shabbat about the klal that we accepted what's written in the Bet Yosef, even if it wasn't written in the Shulchan Aruch. There was a very great debate about this already throughout the there was a very great debate about this in the works of the poskim. One particular case that Rabbi Shalom Misas brings into what Shemesh Yoredei Chelek Tet is that there was a lady that had two animals that she had in front of her that she was cooking, and one of them she found a needle inside, and that needle is a safek if one of the animals is a tarif. So the Rabbanim didn't know how to permit it because it's called a safek beguf v'safek b'ta'arovet. It's not called a real sfeka because one of the sfekot is in the body. So, and it should be decided if it's a safek beguf, it's vaday that it's asur. So, the Bet Yosef writes, safek beguf v'safek b'ta'arovot is not a problem if you found the sfekot in one shot. Complicated to you, and I'm just giving you the overview. The Bet Yosef writes one thing. He doesn't write this way in the Shulchan Aruch. It's not clear in the Shulchan Aruch. Do we accept what's written in the Bet Yosef? Ben Ish Chaya Zet Teshuva in Rav Pe'alim Chelek Alev Siman Chav Bet Yoredea. That we do not accept what's written in the Bet Yosef. And you have to be machmir in such a case because the Shulchan Aruch didn't write it. The Moroccan Rabbanim, the Asher Li Shlomo, quoted by Rav Ovadia Yosef in Yebi Omer Chelek Chet, in Chelek, I think it's Chelek Chet, in his Hiarot on the Rav Pe'alim over there, brings the Asher Li Shlomo and other poskim that say you do follow what's written in the Bet Yosef, even against even if it's not written in the Shulchan Aruch, because he didn't contradict it, he just didn't write it. That was another klal that was written by Asher Li Shlomo and other great Rabbanim, that we follow what's written in the Bet Yosef. That's another klal. Now, there was many different scenarios where the Av Bedin had to preside over. Besides providing over the day-to-day fights that there was between husband and wife, and always making sure to try to bring Shalom Bayit between them, that seemed to be a very large degree of what they had to deal with. Once again, these are from the Piskei that we are working on. Let me just give you a few examples. There was one regarding apotropsim, was a very common thing. And apotropos is basically somebody that was appointed by the bedin to take care of the money of orphans. There was many times orphans that their parents died young in those days for many different reasons. The medical care wasn't the same that we have nowadays, amongst other things. So there was many more yitomim that we Baruch Hashem that we don't have nowadays, and they didn't know what to do with the money. Who's going to take charge of the money? A lot of times the money was just could be left to waste. So one of the jobs of the bedin was to take care of the money of the apotropes. So there's one apotropes that after the children grew to be 20 years old could take over their business dealings. They wanted an accounting of everything the apotropos spent during that time. The apotropos says, "What do you mean? I was appointed by the bedin, and they put me in charge. I don't have to give any appointment." So Rabbi Shelomo AbenDanan in Bakesh Shelomo Siman Mem Bet says that absolutely every single dollar has to be accounted for, and even though it's not written explicitly in the takanot, but that is the halacha. Another area where he had to deal with was that a lot of times there was marriage with small children. And here there was one case that Reuven took a wife, and she was a small girl, right? And she was too small that he could actually live with her as a wife, but she was designated for him as a wife already. He married her. And she had like these scabs on her head that really smelled. So he says, he said, listen, I never had to live with her as a man and wife, but now she's older, can't do it. I want out, and I don't want to pay my ketubah. He sided with the man. He said that's one of the mumim that you can't take, and in this is written in Shelot Utshuvot Asher Li Shlomo Siman Samech Bet, and he exempt the man. Another case regarding shiduchim. There was a man that was forced to be engaged with a certain girl, and he didn't. He saw that during the engagement period, it wasn't going too rosy. A lot of fights, email exchanges. Each one was tagging each other on Facebook in the early 1900s. It wasn't going well. No, actually, in the early 1900s, it wasn't going well. So he said that he wants out and he doesn't want to have to pay, and it seems to be that there was he was able to prove that he didn't know what usually they made penalties if somebody breaks a shidduch. Over here, in a monumental psak in Bakeh Shelomo Siman Hey, says Rabbi Shlomo AbenDanan, it was better to stop the shidduch now than later on, because what's going to happen is that he's going to marry her and he's going to eventually divorce her, and that's worse. So you better stop the train right now before it rides. Another case that came to him from Gibraltar, and listen to this case, Rabbotai. This was written by the Harav Rahman, Rabbi Moshe Chaim Ibn Naim, who was the Rav of Gibraltar at the time. And they send him the following question. And this is written in the Shilot U'Shuvot Rachamim Peshutim of Rabbi Refaeli Ben Dinan Chet Even Ezer Siman Aleph, that there was a boy who was lodging by the house of a widow, and she had a daughter. What happened? He got this daughter pregnant. Yep. And it was very embarrassing. He didn't know what to do. So he said, you know what? In order so nobody should find out extremely embarrassing, he privately married her. But over here, there was a whole big controversy, because what happens is that if we're going to allow marriages to be done privately, this could lead to all types of breaking of barriers. A person is going to say he married this one, nobody's going to know he married it. Already this question in Morocco was in the early 1500s, right after they moved from Morocco. The Hachamim in that time already, was the first takana, I think, that they ever made in Morocco, was that you cannot have a marriage without 10 people there, because then it's going to be known, there people could marry and nobody's going to know, and let's say he dies, and then she could become she's an eshet, whether you don't know if the husband is dead or not, and that could be an aguna issue. Either way, over here they were very strong about it. Rabbi Shlomo AbenDanan, that they made a very strong rule. Anybody who wants to marry a lady, he's not allowed to marry her unless it's in front of a chacham from the city or a rosh yeshiva and 10 people, and otherwise not able to. And this was a famous diyun that was brought in Gibraltar. Many other diyunim that you could take a look at the Sefer with these great rabbanim, the Beddin of Morocco, the Beddin of Fez in particular, Rabbi Shlomo AbenDanan, Rabbi Aaron Bodbol, together with Rabbi Mattatya Serero, and beforehand with Rabbi Vidal Atzarfati, and these are some of the tidbits of questions that there are in these Sfarim Asher Li Shlomo and Bakeh Shlomo of Rabbi Shlomo AbenDanan, Yeh Zichro Baruch.